Welcome to today's webinar, Fostering Resiliency in Families Facing Cancer. My name is Sarah Tirani, and I'm the Program Coordinator for Triage Cancer. I will be moderating today's webinar. Now, before we dive into the topic, I just need to go over some housekeeping. All callers will be muted for the duration of the webinar, and if you have any questions or technical problems, please type them in the chat box to the side of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing by the end of the week on triagecancer.org. And we just launched our new website yesterday, so triagecancer.org is a brand new engine now. And at the end of this webinar, you will be redirected to a survey. Please take a few moments to fill that out and let us know what you think of today's webinar. Excuse me, I am trying to advance the screen, so just bear with me here. I'm not sure what's going on. There we go. Okay, now for those of you who are not aware, Triage Cancer is a national nonprofit organization that provides cancer survivorship education on topics that arise from the point of diagnosis throughout life. We provide this education in a few different ways. First, we have a speakers bureau of experts in all types of cancer survivorship issues available to organizations putting on an educational event. You can read about our speaker bios and request a speaker on our website. We not only participate in events all over the country, but we also host our own educational events for patients, survivors, caregivers, advocates, and healthcare professionals. For example, we host a series called the Triage Cancer Conferences on a variety of cancer survivorship topics. This year's events will be held in Ypsilanti. We actually just held that one earlier this month, Reno, Nevada, and Lewiston, Maine. Travel assistance is available for patients and survivors to attend these events. So if you have a patient or survivor, or you are a patient or survivor, please go to our website to apply for that. As you know, we host a monthly webinar. The next one will be on June 13th, entitled Palliative Caring, Improving Care Through the Early Integration of Key Palliative Principles. And in partnership with Cancer and Careers, we offer a free one-day training for healthcare professionals, navigating cancer, work, and finance. Our next one will be in Atlanta, Georgia on the 29th of this month. And we also offer the Insurance and Finance Intensive. This is a comprehensive certificate program for oncology healthcare professionals and advocates on health and disability insurances and finances. We're hosting the next intensive on August 22nd in New Orleans. You can register for that on our website. In addition to all the events that we host, we offer a number of online educational materials and resources. Our quick guides are designed to be a snapshot of a particular topic. They cover areas such as health insurance, employment, clinical trials, financial topics, estate planning, and legal resources. You can order hard copies of these materials on our website at triagecancer.org/materials request, and you can also download everything from our website. We also have state-specific resources on our site, including topics that you'll hear about today. And because where you live can impact what protections you have access to, we have charts of state laws on employment, disability, and health insurance related issues. We also provide educational animated videos on cancer survivorship topics. We have this one on health insurance basics with key information you need to know about your health insurance plans, especially to minimize your out-of-pocket costs. These videos are available in English with Spanish subtitles. And cancerfinances.org is a site that we host in partnership with the SAM Fund that provides practical information on topics that can impact your finances. We also provide contact information for financial assistance resources. We just released a new module on education, which covers education rights in schools, accessing accommodations, and dealing with student loans. And our educational blog is where we provide great information about cancer survivor topics. And because things are constantly changing, this is where you can find the latest news from us. We also have a monthly newsletter where we announce all of our upcoming events, and it always contains links for registration for all those events as well. And I'd like to thank our sponsor today. We are very grateful for the support of Novartis Pharmaceuticals as a sponsor for the 2018 Triage Cancer webinar series. Now, without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce to you today's speaker, Carissa Hodgson. Carissa comes to us from Madison, Wisconsin. Carissa, welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for tuning in. So I am a licensed clinical social worker and certified oncology social worker. I've been a program manager at Gilda's Club Madison for about 10 years now, and I oversee the kid and teen programs. My background is as a family therapist who has worked in a variety of settings, including outpatient, in-home, day treatment, and the community. And if you're not aware of Gilda's Club, take a minute at the end of the presentation to check out our parent organization, the Cancer Support Community, which is a global network of physical and online support for all people affected by cancer. So for people with any cancer diagnosis, their loved ones, including teens and children, people whose loved ones have died from cancer, and we provide a professional psychosocial support all at no cost. And if you're not familiar, do check us out. There may even be an affiliate near you, or at least you can benefit from the valuable online support and education that you can find on the website. Also, to clarify who I'm addressing today, I understand that there may be a mix of parents with cancer, their partners, other friends and family, medical, mental health professionals, educators, social workers. So I may switch off my language now and again, and it sounds like I'm addressing specific audiences, but truly my message is relevant to everyone. So as cancer diagnoses continue to increase, more and more minor children are going to experience having a parent with cancer. And a 2014 survey by the Cancer Support Community found that more than 2/3 of parents found that their children are not talking openly with them. And certainly at Gilda's Club, we find that almost 100% of the time when a parent is diagnosed with cancer, their primary concern is, how do I talk to my kids? What do I say? What don't I say? How do I help them through this? So it makes sense that with a cancer diagnosis, parents are going to be worrying about how to help their kids through this. This 2002 statistic that shows that over a quarter of kids may experience adjustment disorders, I tend to think that number relates more to kids who are not connected with support, because in our experience here, kids by and large do really well. Even through a very difficult and challenging time, they tend to do really well. So I think that just really underscores the importance of connecting kids with support and the entire family with support when there is a cancer diagnosis. This 2004 study found that children who have a parent with cancer tend to find more distress than kids who actually have a cancer diagnosis. And I think that reflects how children of a parent with cancer tend to feel isolated and not always a part of what's going on. So again, if there's going to be one underlying message throughout this presentation, it's about including kids and keeping an open and honest dialogue with them. A common, very laughable connection here at Gilda's Club is, okay, so now I have this cancer diagnosis, when are all of my other problems going to go away? And they don't, unfortunately, and actually these other stressors usually get worse because, of course, folks are more vulnerable, they're less patient, more sensitive, more triggered by previously manageable stressors. So as one of my colleagues would always say, cancer turns up the volume of what is already there. And a lot of research shows that a parent's depression is the most significant factor associated with impairments in family functioning. So distress screenings, which are now mandated in most cancer clinics, are really important. And being able to identify the depression early on and treat it is really paramount for the entire family doing well through cancer. Research has also identified some more specific risk factors for families facing cancer. The first is being a girl. Girls tend to take on more caregiving roles and internalize stress. Having a parent of the same gender with cancer, that just is because children tend to identify with a parent of the same gender. And then adolescence is a big one. We know that this is a time in development when teens are starting to pull away from the home. They're developing more relationships with peers. They might be driving, have jobs, sports, where their developmental task is really to become more independent. So when a parent is diagnosed with cancer, they feel this push-pull of wanting to be home more, to be with their parents, or they might even have this new expectation that they need to be home more because they're having to carry more household chores or caregiving. And I'm sorry, are people having audio issues? I'm getting some feedback from someone that's hard to hear. Okay, maybe not. I'm just going to keep going. So certainly being a teen and having a parent with cancer is going to be a red flag. So if you put those three together, if you are a teen girl who has a mother with cancer, that's going to be someone at high risk. The longer an illness progresses, certainly the more resources are being used, and that is going to create more stress. Numerous studies concluded that children's problem behavior is determined by the amount of daily hassles and the perception of stressfulness rather than the severity of the illness itself. And lastly, how a parent responds to the cancer diagnosis. So if there is a significant change in his or her mood, affect, routine, that's going to severely affect a child and how he or she responds to a parent's cancer. Now, there are also some protective factors for families. Having an established sense of trust and belonging, those strong family bonds, healthy communication that includes a strong emotional vocabulary and ability to express those emotions, a family that pre-cancer is doing really well and is connected to outside support. These are all buffers that can help a family to get through the cancer. Resilience is certainly a big piece of the puzzle, and that is something that I'm going to focus on throughout the rest of the presentation. So we just put out a survey this year for our members, seeking some feedback from our families about how they are navigating the cancer experience, and specifically feedback they had about resilience. So the survey was sent to over 200 parents. We had 16 respondents that included parents with cancer, their partners, and partners who'd lost someone to cancer. I also conducted some informal interviews with our teen group to gather their insights. The survey was open-ended, so finding some common threads in their responses was especially informative. And I will weave those results from the survey throughout the presentation. So what exactly is resilience? The word resilience stems from the Latin verb resilire, so to rebound, basically. And across disciplines, it's now agreed that it means more than just coping or overcoming. It means thriving under adverse conditions. So in other words, maintaining one's physical and emotional health and one's spirit for living with joy. There's some overlap with the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is a really interesting area of study that's pretty big right now, especially in combination with cancer. And we talk a lot in cancer about survivor's guilt, but there's also this idea of survivor's pride, so that truly someone can feel this sense of accomplishment to get through such a hard and challenging time and feel like they come out the other end stronger. Resilience is more than recovery, so it's not just the absence of pathology. It is healthy and continuing functioning, growth, and positive emotions. It is dynamic because there are many different systems that are interacting to create resiliency. So as those different systems and factors change, so does the resilience. There are many ways to resilience. So an example of this is this idea of staying positive. That's something we hear a lot in the cancer world. Having this idea of we're going to get through this by staying positive can be very authentic and honest for some people, and that works, and that can be a sign of resilience. For some families, it's more of an expression of denial, and it's a denial of their truth and their true experience, and it can actually not showcase resilience. So, humor, optimism, some of these different factors can go either way for folks. And lastly, resilience is more common than we thought. A big researcher in the area of resilience is Ann Maston, and she has this idea of ordinary magic. So the media and children's stories sometimes sensationalize stories of, these extraordinary circumstances where kids overcome these terrible or harsh conditions to, go on to lead these great lives. And we tend to get this idea that these are more extraordinary stories and not ordinary, when in fact, we all have this capability to get through some really tough times. It's just that so often we're not tested. Resilience emerges from very commonplace adaptive systems. So, having a healthy brain and good working order, close relationships with competent and caring adults, committed families, effective schools and communities, opportunities to succeed, self-confidence, and interactions with the world all come together to build our resilience. And I think this concept is really empowering. It's not some magical quality that you have to possess. It's something that we all can build. In the research, different researchers have found sort of their own factors of resilience, but when you look throughout the literature, you can boil it down to these 6 factors. Belonging really being, I think, one of the most important ones. So having those close attachments to one or a few caregivers, having a relationship with the community, that capacity for empathy, authenticity, your control, not feeling like a victim to life, so having more of that internal locus orientation, being able to regulate your emotions and find balance. Problem-solving skills are big, so that flexibility, creativity, motivation to overcome the challenge. Confidence, having a very positive self-view, a belief that you can master a skill, self-responsibility. Insight, being able to reframe a situation. That's a key factor in being able to look at a tough situation, turning lemons into lemonade. And then perseverance, realistic optimism, hope, meaning making, and belief in something bigger. And those last 2, relating back to Viktor Frankl and his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is really a seminal work on resilience, having this idea that even getting through some very tough times, there is meaning in it. Being able to find that meaning is that's really a cornerstone of resilience. Humor is not necessarily listed as a factor of resilience, but I think it's one, and it does show up a lot in the literature, and it comes up all of the time at Gilda's Club, and it definitely was mentioned on our survey. One parent actually wrote, being able to laugh through the craziness was something that helped them to get through their family's cancer. And when you look at humor and actually, studies of humor, they find that humor fosters exploration, creativity, flexibility. It provides a distance and perspective, and it does so without denying pain or fear. So a lot of times at Gilda's Club, there is laughter, and there's authentic laughter, there's dark humor. There are many different ways to use humor as a coping skill. So is resilience born or made? Well, like most things, it's sort of a combination of both internal characteristics and environmental factors. Certainly there are some genetic components like a child having an easy temperament or having an outgoing personality. These are going to contribute to being a resilient person, but I liken it to some like athleticism. Some children are just born with those natural skills and abilities, while others have to practice longer and harder to develop those skills. But the point being, we all have access to those skills and the ability to build them. Brene Brown has done a lot of research in the area of vulnerability, as well as Christian Moore, and talking about that being the birthplace of resilience, being able to turn adversity on its head and work that into being resilient. And Maston talks about this idea of a vaccine for resilience, which really just means, one, being able to tackle smaller problems so that then one can build the self-confidence and the skills to tackle even bigger challenges. One idea is connecting resilience to building a muscle, and I sort of like that metaphor. But within it, keep in mind that muscles can also be injured or can atrophy. So just as with anything, if you don't use it, you lose it. That can be the same with resiliency. If you're not practicing these skills, you can actually lose them. One of the books that I recommend often to families is Wendy Harbrum's book, When a Parent Has Cancer. And I love this quote, which is, "The greatest gift you can give your children is not protection from change, loss, pain, or stress, but the confidence and tools to cope and grow with all that life has to offer them." And I think that's really a big one, because as parents, we already want to protect children. That's just sort of a natural instinct. And then when there's a cancer diagnosis, parents work really hard to buffer their children from having to experience all of the pain and all of the stress that comes along with the cancer diagnosis. But truly, what's happening there is we're robbing them of the experience to grow and to have this as a learning opportunity. So really, we're wanting to help them build the skills just as we're building the skills as we move through this, so that they can come out the other side stronger. Cancer can actually be a growing experience for kids, teens, and families. Obviously, this is not what you wanted, and there are opportunities for the entire family to succeed. So I feel like if these three things coexist, not only will children get through the cancer diagnosis, but they will ultimately thrive. So if children are kept safe, and if they're loved and cared for, if they're treated with respect, which includes honesty, and connected with support and resources as needed, they're going to do fabulous. They really will. And I'm not trying to minimize the complexity of the situation or the magnitude of emotions that accompany a cancer diagnosis. Everyone deserves room for feeling what they need to feel. But my experience working with families going through especially difficult and even traumatic circumstances is that the overwhelming majority of families do cite positive factors after cancer, even if a loved one dies. It will most likely take considerable time and healing, but there is still growth through grief and loss. William Glasser outlines the 5 basic needs, and they build on each other, right? So one needs to have safety before they can experience belonging, belonging before power. And I find that the building of resilience mirrors that. So one has to feel safe in order to be able to build on their resiliency. Certainly during times of chaos, one can exhibit facets of resilience, but one cannot grow them until they have that stability back in life. So when there's a cancer diagnosis, the first thing we need to establish is safety. So being able to make a plan for who's going to care for the kids and make sure that there is a continuity of care. Designating just 1 or 2 trusted caregivers is important because, again, we're trying to create a very safe and normal environment for our kids. Sometimes it's nice to create sort of this inner circle of the most trusted and safe caregivers and then a secondary circle of helpers who can help when needed. There's also this idea that some long-term planning should be taken care of. And this is not a cancer-specific issue. I think all parents should have a plan for guardianship and estate plan. But if there is now a cancer diagnosis, if these things are not in place, this really should be an impetus to do so. And I know that parents tend to get very intimidated by the process and very afraid of it, as if planning for death means that they're submitting to it or giving up the fight. But I found quite the opposite happens when parents actually complete the planning process. Their feedback is almost exclusively that there is a significant relief or an unburdening, and parents feel that they can actually focus more on the living part, knowing that plans are in place. Once safety is established, one can begin to work on belonging. In my experience, belonging is the most essential component for getting through cancer, or any challenging time for that matter. As humans, we are very communal animals. We thrive on physical and emotional connection. On our survey, this theme came up often, this idea of being a team, sticking together, supporting one another, also connecting with other family. Routines and rituals is something that's going to come up. As much as possible, you want to maintain a sense of normalcy for your children. Certainly, things are going to come up where not everything is going to be the same. It just really can't. But if you can keep, some things about special dinners, time together, sports, that's going to help a child feel like not their entire world is falling apart. Also, roles are going to shift. Children may want to be more a part of helping. They want to be a little bit of caregivers. And this is an opportunity for them to practice empathy and kindness. But we just want to watch to make sure that they're not being pulled too much into the caregiving role. But certainly having some role of being a helper can be very empowering for them. Creating a support team is really crucial. Using something like Lots of Helping Hands, Caring Bridge, or some sort of site that organizes your help, streamlining your communication, probably designating some person to be the point person, to be the one that's communicating with everyone. This is going to help bolster everyone to feel like they have the resources to get through this. And then if it's at all possible, connecting with peer support or some community where there are other people who can understand what you're going through. We hear that all the time here, people coming in and saying, I'm really lucky, I've got really great family and friends, they're so supportive, they're wonderful, and they don't really get it. They don't understand my experience of being a parent with cancer. Or on the flip side, being a kid, a lot of kids don't have other kid friends who have a parent with cancer. So if you can find some way to connect them with another kid that can understand the experience, that's going to get them through a lot. Once we have safety and belonging established, we can begin to work on some power. Now, we need to take into consideration the age, development, personality, and unique qualities of each child. But communication and tools and fostering resilience, these are all tools that are going to go a long way. I love this quote. A child can live through anything so long as he or she is told the truth and is allowed to share with loved ones the natural feelings people have when they are suffering. And this idea came up throughout our survey. 15 out of the 16 respondents cited open communication as a key factor for their family getting through cancer. 67% of them specifically wrote out that open and honest communication was vital to helping children through cancer. One parent wrote, kids are very adaptable, and the best way to cope was to just be patient with them and also let them express their anger, frustration, etc. without judgment. Keep in mind that communication is a two-way street. It's more than just talking, so you also want to be that safe, receptive, active listener as well. There is this idea of the big three when you're talking about cancer and how to tell your kids about cancer. So if there were only 3 things that you could continue to repeat to your kids, it would be these 3. Cancer is in no way your fault. Nothing you did or said caused the cancer. Cancer is not contagious. You can continue to hug and kiss and cuddle with mom or dad, and you're not going to catch it. With young kids especially, I recommend avoiding using the word sick in relationship to cancer because kids will get that confused then with a contagious disease like, the cold or flu. And then no matter what happens, you'll be loved and cared for. And now that does actually require that you have a plan. These 3 really tend to relate to the ego or the self, and young kids especially are very ego-driven, very self-focused, and that's normal and healthy. But we want to start there. But even older kids, I find a lot of teens and even adults sometimes need to revisit these 3 facts. I sometimes work with young adults who think, gosh, cognitively I know that I didn't cause my dad to get cancer, but I can't help but a part of me think that we had that really bad fight, we didn't talk for a while, and then he got cancer. So part of me feels like I caused it. So being able to revisit these 3 main points is really important. If I could have a sub 3 that are as important, it would be these. And it's any question is okay to ask, continue to create safe spaces to talk. You will be kept informed. Now, that doesn't mean you have to tell your kids everything all the time right away. You'll definitely need time to process it yourself at times. You might want to wait to tell them until you've made a plan. And with different kids, of course, you're going to be developmentally appropriate. You're not going to tell a 4-year-old the same things as you tell a 14-year-old. But in general, you want to keep them informed and included. And you'll always be honest with them. And if you don't know, you can say you don't know, and you can find out the answers together. These 3 really relate back to the relationship you have with your kids and the trust that exists. And all 6 of these points came up in our survey, and they always come up in our kids support group. 50% of our respondents said that it was very important for kids to feel safe to ask questions. And one respondent wrote, the only times we've had trouble is if we don't give ourselves enough time to answer their questions. And questions come up at the worst times. I think as parents, we've experienced that. It's usually right before bed. That's when kids are really starting to think and reflect. And so everyone's exhausted. All you want to do is go to bed, and then your kid will ask you, are you going to die? So be prepared to answer tough questions at any time. But it is also okay if you're not in a good place or you're truly trying to get to an appointment. it's okay to just validate their feelings, say, that must be really scary, that's a good question. How about we talk about that after school? Or give them a designated time to revisit it. Again, giving yourself room that you don't have to answer other questions immediately, but you do need to give them space at some point to have conversations. You're going to have to revisit these 6 points over and over. It doesn't all work in one conversation. It's kind of like a good shampoo, wash, rinse, repeat. One of our parents wrote, "Be honest about the good, bad, and ugly of cancer. This helps when your kids want to ask questions but are worried about your feelings. Take them to some appointments to see and understand chemo or other treatment." Consider timing when talking with your kids. If you're the one directing the conversation, if you're going to have a conversation with your teenager and you know that she has a big test coming up tomorrow, probably not the best time. And you know your kids, you know, are they better in the morning? Are they better at night? Really use what you know about your kids because, again, you are the expert on your children. And so you can really use feedback from professionals about how to do this, but use your own instinct and your own information. Even identical twins. I remember this here at Gilda's Club. They have the same genetics, but parents would told us they responded completely different. So you never know how kids are going to respond to what you're telling them. Another issue relating back to communication is managing your message, especially in this day and age with social media. If you don't manage your message, someone else will. So we find that a lot of our parents like to stay ahead of it. It might be that you want to send an email out to your kids' friends' parents, just sharing, you know, this is my diagnosis, this is my treatment, this is how we're telling the kids. If you want support or you want some resources, check out this organization or check out these books. That can be really helpful to keep that communication open, and especially if you've designated a specific point person, let them know that. If you don't want to be inundated with questions or you know, niceties, you can always say, please contact my sister. She's controlling all of the information at this point. Also, including the school, that's a big one. Your kids spend a lot of their day there. So being able to connect with someone at the school, being able to create support for your child while they're at school. And different kids need different things, especially older kids and teens. They actually might not want a lot of information shared, and you've got to respect that. So work with your kid to figure out how much to communicate with the school and work out a plan for what they need. If you know that changes are coming, help prepare kids. If you know that you're going to be losing your hair, start talking about that, especially with younger kids. That can be really disruptive to kids, those physical changes. So start reading books, start answering their questions. If you're able to take them with you to medical appointments to ask the nurses and doctors questions, that's great. But do give kids the choice because some kids really want that and other kids are terrified of it. So don't force a kid if they don't want to. One of our respondents really emphasized that point of, you know, I made sure I gave my kids the choice to know how much detail about my treatment they wanted to hear because it gave them a sense of control at a time when they felt very little control. So after that ability to communicate, being able to manage emotions is really important. Managing emotions was in tie for the third most valuable characteristic children possess for getting through cancer on our survey. The first was healthy communication. The second was empathy. You know, those feeling charts with like 100 different faces on it and all the different feelings, those are lovely for expanding emotional vocabulary, but they can be a little overwhelming. So I like to boil it down to sort of these four main feelings and helping kids to then identify what these feelings mean and what their intention is. Play, art, writing, music, these are all wonderful ways to help work through our emotions. Physical activity is a big one, and I think sometimes we forget about that. We often go to like, oh, drawing and art and music as being these lovely, creative, emotional processors. But for kinesthetic kids and people like myself, I really need to move through some emotions. So helping kids to belly breathe, to punch bag, to yell and scream, to wail, these are really important. Don't be afraid of anger. Girls especially, teach them how to fight productively. We don't want kids to abandon their anger because that's ultimately their power. So find productive ways to be angry. I love the idea of throwing ice cubes outside, especially now when it's getting nicer out. A lot of kids, or people for that matter, like the sensation of something breaking, something shattering. So find safe ways for kids to experience that sensation. Play really is how children work through their emotions. So we want kids to have lots and lots of time to play. Play on their own, play with them, have a variety of toys, including things that represent money, people in the house. You want them to be able to have um, factors that relate back to what they might be feeling. It's great for you to actually join them in their play. What we know is that kids and teens do better when you talk with them side by side and when you're engaging with them in some sort of art or activity. The face-to-face talking that a lot of adults do doesn't really work and doesn't translate to kids. So join in the metaphor of their play. Um, try and let go of shoulds. Remember that a lot of it is metaphorical, so it doesn't mean exactly, what they're playing doesn't exactly correlate to what they're thinking. If you start to be concerned about something that they're doing, then that's when you can pull in a professional. Art, of course, that's always a great standby. Kids can do it on their own, but you can also do it as a family. Going back to that idea of the family being a team, I think a great activity is coming together to create a family flag or a family crest, create a family motto or a song or a dance, something that can really get you guys jazzed up, on treatment days or on days that you guys are feeling blue. There are wonderful ways to join in together and create. Um, I will always remember the story of a boy who participated in one of our support groups, and they were creating pictures of their family. And the little boy drew his dad, and there was a gun pointing at the dad's head. And the mom was understandably very upset when she saw this picture, and she didn't understand it. And so we really suggested, go home and find a time to just ask him more about what he was drawing. And she called me the next day and was so relieved and said, we had a wonderful conversation, and I found out that what my son was drawing was his idea of dad in treatment. Well, dad had a brain tumor and was undergoing radiation, and so this was the boy's conception of what it must be like for his dad to be getting radiation. So it led to a wonderful conversation about what treatment looked like, and it actually facilitated a field trip so that he could go with dad to the next treatment where he got to see what the room looked like and ask questions of the nurses and doctors, and really opened up conversation, and more importantly, really reduced his fears and worries because he could put a visual to his understanding of what treatment was for dad. We all know the importance of mindfulness, but man, if you can start kids young, then those practices become more a foundation for who we are. Just simple belly breathing. Belly breathing does so much biophysically for us. It just calms our system. So when kids are nervous and scared and angry, if you can teach them how to really belly breathe, that will help. Have them put their favorite stuffed animal on their belly, lie down, and practice watching their animal go up and down. It's very easy and it's simple. It can be done anywhere. It can be done at school. They don't have to feel embarrassed. But there are lots of lovely mindfulness activities that you can do with your kids and do it as a family. Making sure kids have access to information. When I talked with our teens, some teens said they loved being able to get online or access medical journals and find out all the information that they could. That was really relieving for them. And other teens said it was the worst thing ever, and they hated that, and they wish they never would have looked up information. And one of our parents even wrote on the survey that she wished she would have told her son, please do not use the internet. So for some kids, it's empowering. They like to be able to find the information, while for other kids, it just fuels their fears. So consider that when you're talking with your kids. Being able to build on our resiliency. So once we can manage our emotions, then we can start to expand the green zone. So this is a concept of Dan Siegel and Tina Bryson's that I really like, with this green zone being the regulated zone. In the short term, we're trying to help kids to stay in that zone, to regulate. But over time, what we want is to expand it so that that zone gets bigger and bigger, so it gets harder and harder to become unbalanced. Part of the widening of that window of tolerance is allowing kids to face adversity, feel disappointment and other negative emotions, and even to fail. And that is how we expand it, by lovingly teaching them that they can live with and then move through frustration, failure, coming out stronger and wiser on the other side. As much as possible, We want to help our kids to build skills instead of just extinguishing unwanted behavior. That's really hard sometimes, especially when we're exhausted. It's so much easier to bribe our kids or offer a consequence. But ultimately, we're going to be helping them if we can help them build skills. As a parent, we're sort of being asked then to be a teacher or a coach, teaching mindfulness or mindsight skills. So insight is a wonderful skill. There's a great Viktor Frankl quote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." Empathy is a big one, being able to see from the viewpoint of someone else and imagine what they're feeling, and then integrating all these different parts of ourself and our relationship with other people. There's a big part of this as a parent. There's this continuum of being either a very disengaged parent or a helicopter parent. And most of us are trying not to be either one of those. We want to be somewhere in the middle. And that's going to be the best place for our kids. Knowing when to push them to try harder and when to be their cushion and support them when they need the support. Back to this idea that Christian Moore had of turning adversity into opportunity. He has this, cute little idea of flipping the switch. So the quicker we can learn to flip the switch, the better off we're going to be, and it's going to foster and strengthen our resilience. Once we have all of these tools and we're able to use them to not only manage our emotions, but communicate and become more resilient, we have this sense of freedom. We're better able to express ourselves, ask questions, be a part of our family and the community. We can experience that sense of normalcy and just have kids have time to just be kids. There's also fun. And I get this question a lot here of, there's a lot of fun that happens in our kids support group, and some people wonder, how do kids have fun? They're in the middle of talking about cancer, and yet I see them smiling and laughing. Fun can coexist. Somber faces are not required when you're dealing with cancer. Taking a break from cancer can also be really important. And that came up a lot in our survey, and that comes up all the time in our families is, our family just needs a break from cancer. We're going to go focus on just living life and having fun. It doesn't mean that the cancer's gone away, and we're not denying it, but we're just taking a break to laugh. Laughter is so important. There's so many healthy benefits of laughter. I like one mom talked about how her and her daughter reviewed famous women with cancer and bald women just to normalize it and have fun, and they just laughed when they could and had fun shopping for wigs. This picture here with the snowman was this family. The mom was going through treatment, and they were having fun with her wig, making a snowman. So there's lots of ways to still experience fun in the midst of cancer. I wanted to put a special slide in here for teens because, as I mentioned before, that's one of our risk factors is being a teen. I think an important piece of working with your teenager is finding creative ways to communicate. I know that some families find different ways to do this because, again, having those conversations sometimes just continue to create drama. So it might be that you have a family notebook and you all take turns writing in it just as you have time in passing, and you're answering questions or saying things in it. It could even be, if you're not really a wordy family, maybe you're more visual. Maybe it's about having this communal drawing that you guys add to, and it becomes very metaphorical. However it is, if there's a way that you can facilitate this ongoing communication, that's important. And do not forget about how important their peer group is. It really becomes their second family, and in some ways their first family. That's really what happens when you're an adolescent. So it's understandable that they may have to spend a little less time with friends because of the cancer. They might not just have as much access to them, but try and keep that line of communication as open as possible because they're going to need that to vent and to get support and have that sense of normalcy as they're getting through this. And there's going to be some distancing. That makes sense, and that can be very healthy. Again, this is that developmental time when they might be trying to move off to college, become more independent. And so feeling that pull back into the household creates a lot of feelings, including some guilt and resentment. And sometimes the best thing is even connecting teens to a professional counselor. The big things we look for are disturbances in the big four. So if you see children starting to regress, having problems with school, sleep, and eating, persistent changes. So if you have a kid that's normally pretty outgoing and now they become very withdrawn, pay attention to that. Again, you're the expert on your own child. If there's a red flag going off, do not wait to get connected with support. And that doesn't have to mean that there's something wrong. It just means, gosh, we're dealing with a really tough time. I think we could use some extra help. There doesn't have to be a pathology associated with it. Pay attention to how roles are shifting. Again, it can be very natural for kids and teens to step into a little bit of a caregiver role, but if it's so much of a caregiving role that they're becoming a parent or a surrogate partner, that's a big red flag, and you're going to want to work with the family therapist to flesh that out and help everyone to find a better and more healthy role in the family. That is a good point to make, in that if you're sending a kid to therapy, there really should be a family component to it. Families are a system, and one piece does not move without affecting every other piece. So if there is a child who's having a rough time, or a couple of children, a good therapy plan is to include parents in that. Try and find a therapist who has experience with cancer and kids. If you have a kid especially who is ruminating about a bad experience, like if they witnessed an emergency event or they saw a parent die, they're having nightmares about this event, EMDR is a really good modality to help them decrease the trauma associated with that memory. Peer support, if at all possible. Kids do not have the capacity to seek out peers like adults do. So whatever you can do to connect them with other kids who have a parent or loved one with cancer is really important. It's just so normalizing for them to see other moms who are bald or dads with masks. I think in our support group, that's 50% of it, is just that normalizing factor. Then all of the skills and communication and tools that we offer are great, but that validation is most important. There are some really great peer support groups throughout the U.S., but even if you have to find informal ways through churches, or if you can talk to your social worker at the clinic, maybe they can connect you with another family. Whatever you can do to get your kids connected is going to be really important. Getting your school involved. School counselors are there to help. Letting your kid know that that can be a safe place to go if they're having a hard day at school. Accessing clergy if you're a part of a religious institution. Medical teams are great if you can have your kid come along to field trips. Child life in the clinics and hospitals are a fabulous resource, and summer camps. Man, if there's one thing other than Gilda's Club that came up on our survey, it's Camp Kesem. And if you're not familiar with this national camp, check it out. It is a free sleepover camp for kids who have a parent with cancer or who have lost a parent to cancer. And I have yet to find a kid or a teen that has not just fully loved this experience. One of my colleagues pointed out when talking about resilience, this idea of parents accepting resilience. And what she said was, the hardest thing that she sees is for parents to truly accept that they are expendable, that their kids will move on and be okay without them. And I don't think she meant that in any way crude or dismissive of the relationship between a parent and a child, but more this idea that kids really can move forward in the absence of a parent, even through loss and through grief. They can live fully and grow, and ultimately that's what a parent's wish is for their children. But that's very hard. It's very hard as a parent to accept that you might be gone and that your kids will live on and be okay. There are a lot of silver linings in a cancer diagnosis. Maturity came up so much in our survey, mentioned either in the positive of, gosh, our child is so mature, or even in the negative of our kid had to grow up too fast. But the teens themselves, when I interviewed them, that's what they said 100% was all of them felt like, compared to their peers, they were more grown up in a positive way. It certainly teaches empathy. Kids are learning how to be a good friend and a partner and parent. Self-confidence, that resilience, and gratitude for life. Some quotes from our parents. One is, cancer fast-tracked the growing up process. An appreciation for days and time together was embraced. We no longer complained or focused on things that didn't really matter. We talked more openly and valued family time much more. Another was, we understand the importance now of being in the present and doing what we can, when we can, as a family. So Sarah was very lovely to upload a couple of handouts for me. You'll see over on the control panel on your right, 2 PDF links. One is to a book list, and another is to cancer resources. But if you have a hard time accessing those, I included my email. So please feel free to email me at any time for those resources. I think they have a lot of really good books and also resources that might be close to you, or web-based resources that would be really valuable. And if anyone's ever interested in my bibliography, I'm happy to send that as well. I also included the Cancer Support Community website, so do check that out and see how it might be helpful to you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our presentation, but before we go, we have time to take some questions. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we will get those to Carissa and see what she has to say. Okay, hold on, I'm seeing something come in here. Okay, here's one, a good one actually. What other words do you recommend using besides sick?
Oh, that is a good one. Well, I, as much as possible, try and use the word cancer. I think some people give it too much power. And for kids, it doesn't carry that same scary connotation as it does for adults. So really just trying to take on the word cancer as much as possible. It's ultimately, it's a disease, so you could use the word disease as well. I think those are the 2 best ones.
Great. Okay. Here's one. How do you address the concept of hope with kids?
We have a lot of families that grapple with this idea, especially if they're facing a terminal diagnosis, of like, how can we hold on to hope? And I think it's important to remember that both hope and reality can coexist. Even if you're facing some really dire circumstances, there still is hope within it. I think the problem families run into is when they cling to hope and it causes them to deny reality. It gets very confusing for kids because they can sense that it's sort of a lie. So there's this idea of circles of hope that was actually part of a webinar I listened into a while ago, which is you can always continue to hope. Like in the world of cancer, it's like, you know, the first one is you hope that the results come back negative, and then if you hope for good treatment, you hope they get it all. But even as you're facing death, you can then hope for a good death and hope for a good legacy. So hope exists even in the face of death and even beyond death.
Okay, all right. And we have one here. What one book or resource would you recommend for parents who are newly diagnosed? But I would actually expand that, because obviously a book you would read to a 4-year-old is not the same sort of book that you might give to a teenager to read. So do you have 2 books?
Yes. Well, the first resource I always point parents to, because it collects into all kids. And it's free. If you go to the Cancer Support Community, they have a downloadable PDF booklet called "What Do I Tell the Kids?" And I think it's very informative, but it simplifies information, whether you're talking about a 4-year-old or a 14-year-old. They actually include pages on developmentally different kids. I point all parents in that direction, and what I like is it's free and you can access it. There are so many great picture books that you'll find on that list. Some are in Spanish. You start to run into problems when you talk about teenagers because there are less books for teens. However, there is just one fantastic book for teens, which is My Parent Has Cancer and It Sucks. It's an awesome book. It's written by a teen and her dad. And it covers a lot of different topics, and the way it's written, it's sort of, there are pieces of it that are illustrated in sort of comic book style. I think that is a great book for teens.
Fantastic. Okay. I think that is going to probably pretty much wrap that up. So I'm trying to advance the slide again. Bear with me. There we go. All right. So to finish up here, I just want to thank everyone who joined us today. And if you would like more information about this topic or would like to stay in touch with us in any way, you can email us at info@triagecancer.org. You can also sign up for our newsletter on our homepage at triagecancer.org, and you can connect with us on social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You will be receiving an email shortly after this webinar that contains the link to the survey that I mentioned earlier. We would very much appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to complete this. The feedback is very important to us. And thank you so much, Carissa. And this concludes today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody.